We need to differentiate between at-tafsir wat-tadabbur. This is what people get confused. When you memorize, what are you doing? You're reading again and again and again. But what for? The valuable things of the ocean are found deep inside. So you need to dive the book. Find me a contradiction. Just one. Half a contradiction. And we will leave the Quran and we'll leave the entire path. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Well, to answer this question, we need to get the answer from the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal very clearly and openly mentioned the purpose for why He revealed this Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal in Surah Sad, He said, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. So if we look at this ayah in Surah Sad, Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions at the beginning, كِتَابٌ. This is a remarkable book. أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ. We revealed it unto you, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. إِلَيْكَ implies a tashrif. We gave it to you as an honor. لَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكُمْ كِتَابًا فِيهِ ذِكْرُكُمْ. There is an honor for you people in this book. So this remarkable book that Allah Azza wa Jal revealed unto the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, nothing like it in existence. What for? What's the point? What's the purpose? Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Mubarakun. It is a book of barakah. It's a source of barakah. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ. The purpose, the reason for why it came down was so that mankind can ponder over its ayat. That's the purpose why it was revealed. So everything you mentioned of people wanting to read the Quran, people wanting to memorize, all of that was for the purpose of reflecting over the ayat. Like even right now, when you say someone is memorizing, in order to memorize you need to repeat. Why would you repeat something if it wasn't to understand it? Right now, if you saw me with a book and I read a paragraph, and I read the paragraph again, and I read it a third time, and I read it a fourth time, automatically you'd say this person is repeating this paragraph because he hasn't understood it yet. He's repeating it to understand it. And so simply, even teachers in school, when a student reads something and he didn't understand, the teacher will say, read it again, read it again, read it a third time. And so when you memorize, what are you doing? In essence, that's what you're doing. You're reading again and again and again. So what for? Yani the memorization process is forcing you to reflect over what you're reading. But we've missed the point. We're thinking now that we're just repeating the ayah to get it in our memories so that we can have it here, and so that when I lead the prayer, I didn't have to have a mushaf to read it. Or if I'm on my own without a mushaf, I can now read the ayat without the assistance of an actual mushaf. That's not the purpose of memorization. The purpose of memorization was to reflect, because you're repeating, you're reading again. So you're forced to understand that which you read. And that's why it's a sad fact. It's a sad fact to know that the book that is read the most on earth, and it's the most misunderstood or not understood, is the Quran. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. That's a sad fact.
It's a profound statement, actually.
That's it. Why? Because we missed the point of why this Quran was revealed. So it's very important to see, what does Allah want from us when it comes to this Quran? He said, لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا. It comes from the word at-tadabbur, which comes from the word ad-dubur. Ad-dubur is the back of something, the back of something. For example, the animal, its tail is referred to as ad-dubur. Dubur al-naqa, dubur al-himar, dubur al-kalb, dubur al-hirra, whatever the animal is, it's the back, the tail, the back end. That's ad-dubur. So at-tadabbur means that you want to go to the back of something. You want to search deep, deep, deep until you get to the back end of the meaning of this thing.
You want to get below the surface to the deeper meaning of something.
Ayywa. Like they say about the ocean, you know, when you see the ocean, all the pearls and all the valuable things of the ocean are found deep inside. So you need to dive, you need to go all the way down to the bed, and then that's where you'll find the oyster, you'll find the pearls, you'll find the beautiful things.
There's a nice phrase in English that I want to get to the bottom of this. That almost feels like a good translation for tadabbur is the act of getting to the bottom of it, something.
That's it. I want to get to the bottom of something. That is exactly what at-tadabbur is.
Now, some people have this, you can say, a question or a misconception, or let's say it's a myth maybe, which is that reading the Quran or recitation is for everybody, but understanding the meanings and reflecting on the meanings is for scholars. And so it's fine for us to recite for barakah and for rewards, but only the scholars need to really understand what it is, and they can tell us what's going on or what we need to do about it. But us directly understanding the meaning or making extra effort is not necessary. It's not for us.
In this discussion, we need to differentiate between at-tafsir and at-tadabbur. This is what people get confused. Because they don't differentiate between these two words, as a result, they think that the understanding of the Quran and its explanation is to a certain people as opposed to other people. How do we solve this and how do we explain it? We say you need to understand the difference between the two. So let's explain and then we'll find out what the reality of this matter is. We have something called at-tafsir. At-tafsir هو كشف المعنى. At-tafsir means to explain the meanings of an ayah. To explain the meaning of an ayah.
It's like, what was the intent of the author? You're uncovering Allah's intent.
No. In the linguistic aspect, it comes from the word fassara, like safar. It comes from the word safar. Safar is when you travel to a new land and you're discovering new land, right? Or they say imra'atun safira, a woman that has unveiled and exposed her body, exposed herself. So at-tafsir means to expose the meanings of an ayah. For example, if I was to say Allahu Samad, as-Samad, you look at as-Samad, what is as-Samad? So the tafsir, let me expose this word to you, and I say huwa alladhi tasmudu ilayhi al-khalaiq. As-Samad is the one basically who everyone needs him and he doesn't need anyone.
Because samada in Arabic means to rise or to go upwards. So someone might be thinking, hold on, what does it have to do with Allah? What does it actually mean in this context? And then what you said in Arabic is that it's the one whom everybody rises to him and they're in need of him essentially. But the act of going from Allahu Samad, these two Arabic words, to arriving at this meaning of it means Allah is needed by everybody and everybody rises in need of him. They rise to him. This process is a process of tafsir, we can call it interpretation, scholarly interpretation. So one of the important things is that in the modern world we have a lot of people trying to reinterpret the Quran, modernist, liberal interpretations, feminist interpretations of the Quran, and the idea of tafsir is it's reserved for the scholars.
Yes.
Scholarly interpretation. Not everybody can be a mufassir. So now the mufassir, an interpreter of the Quran, a scholar, has given me the summary meaning.
Yes.
Allah Samad means X.
Yes.
Is this where the reflecting and tadabbur comes into play?
So that's what tafsir is, right? Tafsir is when we say Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said such and such about the ayah. Tafsir is to say Ibn Abbas said so and so. Mujahid, rahimahullah, said this. Qatada said this. When you hear the names of scholars, the companions, as-salaf, as-sahaba, saying something about an ayah, that's tafsir. So yes, the tafsir it's knowledge-based. You need to go back to the opinions of as-sahaba, those after them, and that's where it is. That's where the tafsir comes from. And it exposes the meaning of an ayah. That's a tafsir.
A question, Shaykhna. So you said, I actually remember one time we were sat at a restaurant and I think it was a dessert place, if I remember, my memory serves me right. And you're having some coffee and you put the mug in the middle of the plate, okay? And there were some tissues and you put that all around the mug and you said the statements of the Sahaba and the early scholars, the Salaf, protects the meanings of the Quran just like I've protected this mug. Okay? That's a beautiful point because I think even the process of tafsir, yes, there's the Arabic language, so you need to understand what the words linguistically mean. There's context, when was the ayah revealed, where, addressing what. There's the Prophet's explanation, tafsir al-Nabawi. But then the first three generations of scholars, they come and they explain the verse. It means this, it means this. Could you explain that analogy to me a little bit? How does that protect the meaning?
So, yes.
So you don't go...
The idea is we're saying today we witness an attack against the companions, against as-Salaf, against the Sahaba. We witness an attack. And the only reason these attacks today exist is so that people can move this barrier from the Quran and make way for their own interpretation. So that's what we meant, that as-Sahaba are a barrier around the Quran. والتابعين والسلف are a barrier around the Quran. Meaning you can't enter on your own. You can only enter to this Quran through their explanation of the Quran. So these attacks against individual Sahaba and saying like we are men like them and Hadith's companion, he did a few wrong things, and these attacks are only for one reason, to drop these people in the sight of the population, so that people can make their own way to the Quran and say, I can interpret it on my own, I can explain it on my own. And that is dangerous. That's why we're saying it. Tafsir is قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, such as قال ابن عباس, قال مجاهد. هذا التفسير. التفسير. If someone gives tafsir and he's unable to tell you who said who, stop. Go and reference it. Go and reference. That's how you know what tafsir is.
So the interpretation, the scholarly interpretation of the Quran is, there's a boundary based on the earliest interpretation of the companions who knew the Quran best and proximity to the Prophet ﷺ and the Arabic language. And so there it's said that, I believe it was Qatada or Mujahid that narrated that he sat with Abdullah ibn Abbas, the Prophet's companion, radiallahu anhuma, and every ayah in the Book of Allah was explained to him by this great Sahabi. So when that exists already, it forms a guardrail. So this is a protection of the Quran's interpretation, and this is perhaps one of the ways Allah has protected the book from being distorted.
Yes, alhamdulillah. هذا from the protection of the Quran that Allah Azza wa Jal guaranteed. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Yani Allah Azza wa Jal said, we revealed this Quran and we will guard it, we'll protect it. So هو حفظ لفظا ومعنى. It was guarded, protected, both in its words, its harakat, fatha, kasra, dhamma, every letter, every ayah has been preserved as it is, and also its meaning has been preserved through the works of the scholars, especially the tafsir of the companions and the tabi'een that came after them. So now, the Quran has been, the tafsir of the Quran has been done completely from the very beginning of the Quran until the end. We have a complete tafsir of it, and there's no more room to add to at-tafsir. بس هذا التفسير.
Now we come to the tadabbur.
Now we come to the tadabbur. At-tadabbur now is what we can say a personal journey for each and every single one of us. And we have been invited to tadabbur al-Quran by Allah Azza wa Jal multiple times in the Quran. In Surah An-Nisa, we find Allah Azza wa Jal saying, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. He's saying, why don't they ponder over the Quran? Primarily, this ayah was addressing the disbelievers, but it also includes the believers. And Allah Azza wa Jal was challenging the disbelievers. At the end of this ayah, He said, وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Why don't they ponder and reflect over this Quran? Had it been from other than Allah, they would have found a tremendous amount of contradiction within it. لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Not just a little bit of contradiction, a lot of contradiction. Why? Because speech of man is full of contradiction. The speech of Allah, one of its signs that the Quran is actually the speech of Allah is that there's no contradiction in it. So bro, find me a contradiction. Just one. Half a contradiction. And we will leave the Quran and we'll leave the entire path. You'll never find. So Allah Azza wa Jal addressed the disbelievers in this ayah. And in Surah Muhammad, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. In these ayat, He was addressing the munafiqun, the hypocrites. He says, why don't they reflect and ponder over the Quran? Or is it the fact that there are seals and locks on their hearts? أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Because the hypocrite, he has an issue with his heart. The hypocrite, his heart hasn't surrendered. His body has surrendered. Right? He shows that he worships Allah on his body. But inside his heart, لا يؤمنون, as Allah Azza wa Jal said. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ, on their tongues, on their limbs, they're worshipping. يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم وما هم بمؤمنين. Inside, ما في إيمان. There is no iman. So Allah Azza wa Jal addresses the hypocrites. Why don't they ponder over the Quran? Or is it the fact that there are seals and chains and locks on their hearts? In other words, if they pondered over the Quran, those locks would be unlocked. And as a result, they will find themselves moving towards the pure guidance, the pure form of Islam that should be embraced. So this is an address for us as believers as well. And then finally, which we began this podcast with, the ayah in where Allah addressed the believers specifically was in Surah Sad, when He said, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا. This time He said, آيَاتِهِ. He didn't say we sent this book down so that they can reflect over it. He said so that they can reflect over its ayat. So there's a more personal relationship. We're expected to ponder over every ayah, not just the Quran as a whole. So that includes things like Alif Lam Mim, and then look into Ar-Rahman, just as an ayah on its own. Ponder over this ayah. You read Wal Fajr. Stop. Don't move forward. Read Wal Fajr. Stop. This is enough for you to ponder and reflect over. And there are so many things you can ponder over. We'll come to it in the examples. But that's the idea. Every ayah we read, we're supposed to be pondering over its meaning. Now, this is التدبر. And a prerequisite for التدبر is التفسير. You cannot do tadabbur of the Quran without التفسير. So before you want to engage in the exercise of التدبر, and we'll speak about how it's done, you need to first have a proper tafsir of the ayah. I can't do tadabbur of قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ if I don't know what al-falaq is. How are you going to reflect over the ayah if you don't know what what the words mean? How? It won't happen. So a tafsir is first important. Just a simple tafsir. They call it a tafsir al-ijmali. Comprehensive, general tafsir of the ayah, so you know what's going on. And then afterwards, you're able to do at-tadabbur, which has a few parts, and we'll explain those.
Does the English translations of the Quran, or translation in general, is translation a form of tafsir, a form of interpretation? Could it give you like the simple meaning of an ayah?
No, the translation is actually considered tafsir, because the translation is giving you a translation of the explanation of the ayah in Arabic. Because there's no such thing as tafsir of an ayah, translation of an ayah. You can't translate an ayah. That's impossible. But you can translate the meaning of an ayah. So the translations that exist out there are not to be called the translation of the ayah. No, we don't say that. You want to be more technical, you're going to say this is an attempt to understand the ayah, and it's a translation of the meaning of the ayah.
So it's a form of tafsir has had to be done, and then an interpretation has been adopted of a particular ayah, and then they're trying to then convert that interpretation to English in some way. And that's why if you perhaps in the Tartil app you have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 translations. If you stack them up, you'll see that there's slight differences. Not because the original text is different, but because they're making interpretive decisions.
That's right.
Okay, so
that's why the translations word for word don't actually work. They're very horrible. I've seen some books that have done word for word translation. It's off. Doesn't make sense. You're not capturing anything from the ayah. The better translations are the translations that read the ayah, read a short, concise tafsir of the ayah, then they translate that tafsir of the ayah. So that's the translation of the meaning. You're going to get a lot more understanding of the ayah if you were to stick to these type of translations.